About 5 years ago, Chevrolet beat Tesla to market with their Bolt EV. It was technically the first mass-produced, affordable all-electric car that offered more than 200 miles of range, and more importantly, it had a starting price of under $40,000. Now, the Bolt has been a pretty big global success for Chevrolet in terms of sales. So for 2022, we're looking at an all-new version, and it's available in two different flavors now, the regular Bolt, and of course, the more crossover-like Bolt EUV. So let's take a first look. Now globally, Chevrolet says they've sold over 100,000 Bolts across the world. Here in America, they've done roughly around 80,000 of those. So the US market is the biggest market, of course, for the Bolt. And back in 2017, when this car came out, it beat the Tesla Model 3 to market by about a year. Remember, this car offered around 230 miles of range. It had a starting price of around $38,000. Now back then, it was also a very competitive car, being front-wheel drive and offering 200 horsepower and 0 to 60 around 6.5 seconds. Today, the Bolt carries over with the same 65 kilowatt-hour battery pack, the same single engine or single motor with front-wheel drive and the same power. However, Chevrolet wants to target the mass media or the mass consumers with the new Bolt because the Bolt and Bolt EV have a new starting price that is $5,000 less expensive than the previous generation, starting at $31,995 for the regular model and just $2,000 more for the EUV. So as you can see, before you start comparing it to a Tesla, you should know that the Bolt is technically the most affordable all-electric car that offers over 200 miles of range, and now it starts at just over $30,000. Now that we got the pricing out of the way, let's talk about the design of the all-new Bolt. Now, of course, the first generation Bolt, I technically wasn't a fan of the styling for that vehicle. It had a very dorky, kind of tall, upright hatchback look to it, and it looked a little bit like a mini minivan, which is a design that doesn't really do well for American buyers here in the States. Now, of course, for this all-new version, you still have that hatchback shape, which has somewhat dorky proportions on the regular Bolt. However, the new handsome edition is definitely that Bolt EUV, or you could even call it the Bolt Max, because all it is technically is just a bigger version of the Bolt. It's about around 6 inches longer overall at 169 inches long versus 163 inches long for the regular Bolt. The regular Bolt is around the same size as the current generation. Now, up front at the new front fascia, you can see it has the corporate Chevrolet bow tie grille. The grille itself actually doesn't even have any openings, which is kind of the same as the previous generation. I do like the black Chevy bow tie emblem as well. And the new headlights, you can see it has a separate LED daytime running light, which also houses the turn signals. Right below that, you have standard full LED headlights. The previous generation didn't even offer LED headlights. You had HID headlights, which is, again, an older technology. And overall, I think the EUV is definitely the more handsome option. This is supposed to have more crossover-like proportions. However, when I look at the two vehicles side by side, I can't help but wonder, why didn't Chevy just call it the Bolt and just offer the other one up as like a Bolt Max, kind of similar in name to the old Malibu Max from back in the 2000 eras? Because I think the Bolt Max or Bolt EUV is the one that's probably going to be selling more consistently over the regular Bolt, because it just looks better and it's only $2,000 more. Now, looking at the side profile, you can see 17-inch wheels are going to be standard again. I'm imagining Chevy has kept the tire width around the same because they preserved the range of this car at 259 miles for the regular Bolt and 250 miles for the EUV. I'm imagining the EUV is slightly less aerodynamic, and it should also be slightly heavier versus the regular Bolt. You still have that single motor powertrain at the front of the vehicle, driving the front wheels, offering 200 horsepower and 266 pound-feet of torque. Those of you who are hoping that Chevrolet would offer a dual motor version with all-wheel drive, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to have to look at a Tesla, of course, or perhaps the upcoming Nissan Ariya, and there's also the Volkswagen ID.4 and the Ford Mach-E if you guys are trying to look at other manufacturers. Now, in terms of the overall size, like I mentioned before, the EUV model is around 169 inches long. It's around 6 inches longer versus the regular Bolt. And Chevrolet also already announced a few specifications. The rear suspension continues to be a semi-independent torsion beam, so a little bit of a less expensive design. But they did, again, preserve the handling of the previous generation. So Chevy says this is still going to be a quick accelerating EV with that instantaneous torque. It should also have some comical wheel spin when you really put your foot down. And it should also remain a relatively well-handling car. Now at the rear, I think Chevrolet really improved the design of the Bolt, especially the EUV model. I'm still not liking the proportions of the regular Bolt. It has kind of like a goofy, dopey clown car look to it with those taillights. It looks a little bit robotic, but I do like the styling of the new EUV. They kind of got rid of and changed some of the character lines in the rear tailgate area that makes it look very much more crossover-like. I also like the silver roof rails that you get on the EUV model. That's also the only model that you can option in a panoramic sunroof. So a lot of Bolt owners were asking for a panoramic sunroof. Chevrolet complied with that and they offer it on the EUV model. Now, those of you again who are wondering what's the charging speed like for the new Bolt? Well, they haven't changed that from the previous generation. You still have the ability to DC fast charge the vehicle at up to around 55 kilowatt hours. Chevrolet basically says you can add 100 miles to your Bolt on a DC fast charge in about 30 minutes. However, the good news for those of you who are planning to charge at home, which is where most people are going to be charging anyways, the Bolt will come with a dual mode charger, and it has the ability to level 2 charge on board at up to 11 kilowatt hours. So if you guys have that upgraded feature at your home where you could charge that quickly, the Bolt EUV and regular Bolt should charge much faster at home. Chevy basically still says it'll charge at around 25 miles an hour when you have it charged in a level 2, or around 4 miles an hour if you have it charged at a level 1. Now, speaking of which, if you guys have never owned an EV before, you'll be pretty happy to know that Chevy will also pay for somebody to come out and install a level 2 charger at your home. That is definitely a first that I've never seen for any other manufacturer. You don't actually have to pay to have an electrician come out. Chevy will send that to you, and you also have access to over 800,000 public charging stations when you're using your Chevrolet MyLink app, which allows you to, again, search for that. And for the first time ever, Chevy is finally offering an embedded GPS in the Bolt, and you can also option in Super Cruise. So those are two features that were frustratingly missing in the previous generation, and now you can get those new technologies, which should make the Bolt and Bolt EUV a much easier electric car to live with on a daily basis. Now let's move on to the interior of the new generation Bolt, because this is an area where Chevrolet really cut corners on the previous model because a lot of their money went into, of course, the powertrain. So now for this new generation, Chevy is trying to add a little bit more luxury and comfort and technology, of course, into the next generation Bolt. The first thing they did, they replaced those awful seats that nobody really found comfortable. They were just narrow, they were very thinly padded, even for somebody who wasn't very wide of frame. And now the new models have new seats, so I'm very excited to try those seats out to make sure that they're actually comfortable. You have a new flat bottom steering wheel with the new black bow tie emblem. And in terms of the tech features, there's a standard 10.2 inch Chevrolet MyLink infotainment system, which is a touchscreen. It now offers wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. So again, lots of great tech. You also have an 8-inch screen in the instrument panel behind the steering wheel that gives you all different sorts of information. And Chevrolet is also upping the premium factor. Like I mentioned earlier, you get an available panoramic sunroof on the EUV model, and for the first time ever, you can get heated and cooled seats in the front and heated rear seats on your Bolt. So again, premium touches that you could never get on the Bolt before, in addition to that new Super Cruise feature, which will be optional. Now, Chevrolet says the Super Cruise function works like the one that I've tried in the Cadillac CT6. However, it doesn't have the auto lane change ability that the new Escalade has, where it'll change lanes for you. Chevrolet says that that feature is part of the newer technology platforms, and since the Bolt is technically based off of the previous generation platform, it's just been updated, it didn't get the latest version of Super Cruise that includes the auto lane change function, which is a little bit disappointing. Now, in terms of the overall space, the Bolt EUV is the one you're gonna want if you guys regularly carry passengers in the rear, because that's the one that gets 3 more inches of legroom back there for a total of 39 inches versus 36 in the regular Bolt. And if you look at the cargo area, Chevrolet actually had numbers for that. Chevy says that you get around 16.6 cubic feet of space with the seats up. Fold them down and you get around 57 cubic feet of space. Those numbers are identical whether you go for the regular Bolt or the Bolt EUV, which again, confuses me completely because the EUV is supposed to be a crossover version, but it's only 3 inches longer in the overall length. When you look at the width and the height of the two vehicles, they are exactly the same. So the EUV model technically is not any taller, even with the roof rail crossbars. Chevy didn't increase the ground clearance, nor did they offer all-wheel drive on the Bolt. Now, Chevy was quick to point out that you technically don't need to have all-wheel drive to be considered a crossover. And while I do think the Bolt EUV is the better looking option, I also kind of question why offer 2 models. Chevy should have just called it the Bolt, and maybe the EUV version just call it the Bolt Max or Bolt Plus, because it is basically the better looking version. I don't think consumers would even notice if they didn't even offer the regular Bolt and just made all of them look like the Bolt EUV, because that's the one that no longer, for me, has the proportions of a dorky hatchback that the first generation model had. Now, if you guys are looking to purchase the new Bolt EUV or Chevrolet Bolt EV, Chevy says production of this model will start in the spring of this year and it'll be going on sale in the summer of 2021, so this summer in a few months. And as I mentioned earlier, the starting price is now $31,995 for the regular Bolt, or $33,995, $2,000 more for the EUV model. For those of you who want to be one of the first ones to own this version, Chevy also is going to open up reservations for a first edition model of the EUV, which will basically include Super Cruise. It'll include the heated and cooled seats, the panel sunroof. That model, they say, will start at around $43,000 and it'll basically be fully loaded. And that's why I imagine it's going to top out. So if you look at the price point, it is less expensive than most of its competitors, but it's going to come in around Volkswagen ID.4 territory, and it'll top out where the Mustang Mach-E will start out and be far less expensive, of course, than something like a Tesla Model Y, but around the same price as a Model 3, which is also technically a sedan. So the Bolt is definitely going to occupy an interesting niche in the marketplace, or an interesting space in the marketplace. And I have no doubts that Chevrolet will continue to sell a crap ton of these because the Bolt will be available in all 50 states. All Chevy dealers will be basically offering it around the country, and they won't be dealing with any production constraints because Chevy has kind of already worked out all those kinks from the last 5 years of selling the Bolt in the US and of course globally. But with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed this first look on the all-new 2022 Chevrolet Bolt and Chevrolet Bolt EUV. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.